Hello everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle, where I am delighted to say that for the first time since the end of October we've got a Sunderland win to talk about. Not just a good win for Sunderland to talk about, but I thought a really strong performance as well. And to be honest, exactly what we were hoping and kind of needed to see from Sunderland going into the game. We've obviously been on this strange run where Sunderland have very rarely been playing badly. They've played against some really good teams and there's been a lot of positives to take pretty much from each individual game. But they hadn't won in six. They'd let some big opportunities pass them by. And I think today on home turf against a side in the bottom half of the table, a decent side with a lot of talent, no doubt about it. But it was a game where I think we were all looking about on home turf as well, where we were looking for a big performance from Sunderland to show that they really are that minimum kind of playoff contenders and hopefully maybe still automatic promotion contenders. And I thought they delivered, especially when you consider really difficult conditions to play football in. I've only just about dried out from Storm Darragh, and I'm sure you're all the same. It was some of the worst conditions I've seen at the stadium for a long time. But actually, despite that, I have a lot of respect and a lot of praise for the way that Sunderland kept trying to play their game. I actually thought they made it a pretty entertaining game to watch despite the conditions. I thought that Stoke were good opponents for Sunderland today, and that sometimes your big fear is that teams will come to the stadium they'll slow the game down, they'll pack players behind the ball, they'll play for set pieces, they'll play for the counter-attack, and sometimes Sunderland can struggle with that. Stoke were actually much more open today. They actually had more possession than Sunderland, which is a bit of a rarity. And they were definitely good opponents for Sunderland. They gave the players like Watson, Roberts, Rigg, the space that they kind of thrive upon. So Stoke were definitely good opponents for Sunderland, but even so, I really liked the way that despite the conditions, Sunderland sort of kept playing their kind of football. It was a game that I enjoyed watching and I thought was a really strong, dominant performance. I think that Victor Johansson is, he's definitely the best shot stopper in this division in my opinion. He might even be the best goalkeeper. To be honest, if not for him, I think Sunderland could have run up a really significant sort of scoreline today. I thought they were that dominant. Yes, you always felt that Stoke could score a goal on the break, but I did feel that Sunderland were comfortably the better side, and I think a really sort of cathartic win, to be honest, to watch them not just like I say get the 3 points, but perform really well. So I'm going to get straight into your questions, have a chat about the game, what you all thought of it. The first question here is from Safa Mackham, who says, I'm guessing Tommy will get all the applause today, and rightly so, but Dan Neil played his game of the season for me. Also, Job a little off today, caught in possession and misplayed passes, just not his day. Pretty much agree with that. Yes, obviously, Tommy Watson is going to get all applause today, and rightly so. Listen, I think with Watson, you have to give a lot of credit to him. An 18-year-old performing at that level in the Championship is remarkable, and he deserves a lot of praise for that. I think you also, on two different levels, have got to give Sunderland and Régis Lebris a huge amount of credit. Tommy Watson has been the best player in the under-21s group for a long time. It has been clear that he's been sort of knocking on the door for an opportunity. But actually, when he got his first couple of starts, he looked a little bit tentative. He didn't look like he had a huge amount of confidence. I actually thought going into the Sheffield United game that Sunderland might look to rest him because that was his third game in 6 days. And we actually spoke to Lebris about that in his pre-match press conference and whether he had any concerns. And he saw it the other way. He said, you've got to give these young players opportunities, and also with such a young, exciting, athletic player like Watson, actually it might benefit him. It might be that other players tire quicker than he does. And I thought that was proved absolutely correct. I thought Watson had his best performance in a Sunderland shirt at Sheffield United, and he really carried that into today's game. This was his fourth start in a row, and you can feel he's really getting to grips to the level. I think you have to give Sunderland a lot of credit, not just for giving him the opportunity as an 18-year-old, but sticking with him and giving him a proper run in the team. And we're seeing the fruits of that now. Credit to Sunderland as well, because coming into the season, I think we were all really worried about Jack Clarke going and what that might do to Sunderland's attack. While Clarke was doing what he was doing last season, Sunderland had developed not one, but two successes to him in Romain Mundle and Tommy Watson, and that is not easy to do. I think that's a really impressive feat that deserves a lot of credit. In terms of the other points made there, thought Dan Neil was really good today. I thought that he obviously had a big part in the goal. He snuffed out a counter-attack, moved it out to Roberts. I just thought he was generally really mature and really composed in that defensive midfield role. Good performance. Joe, bit of an off day in possession, gave the ball away a lot more than we're used to seeing from him. Got into trouble a few more times than we used to see him, but that happens. He's had an absolutely brilliant season. I've no doubt he'll be back to his best soon. The other player I thought worth mentioning was Patrick Roberts, actually, because the last couple of videos, and totally understandably so, there's been quite a few questions about Roberts' form, his place in the team. And I do think that his form had dipped over the last week or so. I thought today was back to where he was at the start of the season. I think if you look at, he was really unlucky not to get an assist even before his one for Watson's winner today. A good cross for Isidore at the start of the second half that the striker just couldn't get on the end of. Brilliant little play for that low cross that Watson somehow turned over the bar from a matter of yards. He did everything right apart from that one today, Watson. So I thought it was worth mentioning. That was the Roberts we saw at the start of the season, taking players out of the game, creating chances, beating players on the inside, beating players on the outside. So hopefully that's something that he can take forward in the next few weeks, because I think we would all agree that when Roberts plays like that, he completely transforms the attacking threat in the Sunderland side. So I'm gonna have a sip of coffee and then we will go on to the rest of your questions. Thanks again for sending them in. So Davy James says, will Serkin be fit to start on Tuesday night? Elise always looks far more accomplished as centre-half and Serkin adds more of a threat offensively. Yeah, so I thought Serkin would play today. It was a little bit of a surprise to me that he didn't start at left-back. I would add the caveat that while I agree with you, Davy, I think in the long term, Elise is going to be a centre-half. I think that's his strongest position. They played very, very well away at Millwall in his first game back, his first start back from injury at left-back. So I could sort of understand the decision to an extent. Elise did put a really good cross in for that first-time volley that Isidore should have scored, but put wide as well. So, you know, I certainly wouldn't overreact to that. But in answer to your question, I do think Serkin will be fit for Tuesday. I think probably not starting today was a recognition from Labrise that starting 3 times in a week might be a bbit much for a player who'd missed about a month's worth of action with his wrist injury. I think it's just about managing his minutes. Personally, you know, I can't read Labrise's mind, and I think there's a very good chance Serkin will start on Tuesday. And I agree with you, David, that would be the decision I'd make. No slight on Elise at all, who I think is a hugely talented player, but I agree with you. I think naturally a centre-half, I think Serkin offers so much going forward that I expect him to be back in the team before too long. So Chris says, how does Connolly, after his Millwall goal, continue building confidence with a lack of minutes today? Yeah, I thought Connolly would come on today. I was a little bit surprised when Sunderland chasing a goal that we didn't see Connolly come on. I think he'll be really frustrated, and I think he's kind of entitled to be as well. I think he's been unlucky not to get more minutes than he's had since that really good goal at Millwall, and a pretty selfless performance, playing basically in centre midfield in that game as well. Having said that, there's a big part of me thinks that Mienda deserves to be the next in line. If you look at what Mienda did at the start of the season, it was excellent. Not just his goals that he scored, his work out of possession for the team, his pressing. You know, I think he did deserve his opportunity today. Obviously, you know, that offside goal for Isidore Mienda should probably have already put it in the back of the net, but I thought he had an impact. He's got real energy, Mienda. He goes past players. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Connolly will be really frustrated, and rightly so, but I do think that Mienda deserved his opportunity to get on today in a striking role. And credit to Labrise, because we've spoken a lot in these videos about him not being particularly proactive with the substitutions. Again, didn't make any subs till the 70th minute today, but they were really aggressive ones. Basically went with a 4-4-2. And I do think that Mienda's presence in the final third made a difference, so credit to him for that. George says, when Mundle is fit, who starts wide left? Listen, I think that it's a really interesting question, because it's going to be hard to drop Watson on this form, but I just think, I do think at some point Mundle will come back into the team, because listen, I think Watson has all the attributes to be a Premier League player, hopefully for Sunderland. Really exciting player, but you know, he's made 5 starts in his senior career. Between now and Mundle coming back, hopefully at the start of January, there's 7 games. You know, if, as seems likely, Watson plays in, you know, most of, if not all of those games, we are definitely going to see a little bit of fatigue, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see a little bit of a dip. So I think the exciting thing for me is that when Mundle's fit, what you'll see is there's 2 players who can impact a game, and I think you'll see Watson used as an impact sub an awful lot, which is a role I think he could be incredibly effective in. And every now and then I think Mundle will be an impact substitute as well. To be honest, I think Mundle's level was so high at the start of the season that I would expect him to get an opportunity pretty quickly when he's fit. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, he kind of reclaims that spot. But, you know, I think what Watson has done is he's taken his opportunity while Mundle's out. And I think we're going to see Watson in more games then we don't see him in, to be honest, between now and the end of the season. It might just be that on a lot of occasions he's being used as an impact sub. But listen, Watson's got probably 7 games between now and Mundle being back to prove that he deserves to be a more regular starter. So, what other questions have we got? Okay, so we've got one from Hannah here who says, how many signings can you see us making realistically next month? Well, it's interesting. We spoke going away from the game a little bit, but I know it's a question that a lot of people are already starting to talk about, and it's certainly something that us as journalists are starting to look at and think about. We had a long chat with Labrise about transfers in his pre-match press conference on Thursday. And he spoke about basically saying that as things stand, he thinks that the final third is obviously the area where Sunderland most need to recruit. He made the point that at the moment, defensively, he's got a lot of options. We're going to come on to a question about the back four in a minute, but he's already leaving good players out the side. Midfield, there is a question mark over at the moment because in theory, he doesn't need any other players. However, there is a big asterisk against that. That is dependent on Alan Brown coming back fit at the start of January and Salis Abdul Samed successfully sort of getting fully fit and starting his Sunderland career. Now, if both those players get fit by January, with Rig, Job and Dan Neil as well, I don't think there's a huge need for another midfielder. But, you know, if either or both of those players aren't able to get up to speed quickly, then it might be a position that you need to recruit. I think in the final third, there's an obvious need for just a bit more competition, really. It's no slight on the players in Sunderland squad. I just think, you know, it's a position where you need extra legs. I think we've seen times this season Sunderland, in fact, haven't always had options to change it late on. I think that's really important. I don't know if many of you listened to, but if you didn't, I would recommend going back and having a listen. Non-executive director and of course Sky Sports presenter David Jones is on the Not the Top 20 podcast, a brilliant podcast, and he referenced the fact that, you know, Sunderland are well aware that if you look at Ipswich last season, you know, they were regularly bringing off 3 or 4 of their attacking players in the latter stages of games, and they were scoring so many late goals from having substitutes who were capable of coming on and making an impact with their fresh legs. So I do think we'll see Sunderland recruit. I think we'll see them look to try and recruit in the final third, first and foremost. However, what has been abundantly clear from Labrise, pretty much from day one, to be honest, when we first started talking about January, was that it would be quality over quantity. We know he likes stability. We know he trusts the core of his team. You know, we know he doesn't want to work with a huge group of players. So I think it's very obvious that, to be honest, Hannah, obviously to an extent it'll depend on outgoings. I think we're looking at, you know, 2 or 3 additions maybe. I think that's what we're talking about. But I think the idea is to try and get high quality players who are capable of making an impact pretty much from day one. If you ask me, I think that the sort of Premier League loan market is the place to go, probably. You know, players who maybe aren't getting the level of minutes that they want, but have a lot of talent, have a lot to offer, have some match fitness under their belt. I think that's the kind of calibre of player Sunderland are looking at. The one caveat is that we know if there's a young player who they feel can be a great asset for them in the long run, then they'll go and do that deal. Romain Mundle was the classic example last January. He's not what Sunderland's first team needed at that time, but he was a player that tracked for a long time. He unexpectedly became available, and they knew there was an opportunity to develop him away from the glare of the first team while Jack Clark was doing what he was doing. So you can never say never with Sunderland, Hannah. Maybe they'll pull some surprises out of the bag, but I think the general strategy going into that window is to make a couple of high quality additions, primarily in the final third. So, both Michael and Ian asked about Tuesday's game against Bristol City because we have a major selection dilemma with Chris Metham having served his suspension. One other big positive from today, by the way, that was the last game before the yellow card cut off. So Job Bellingham and Chris Rigg were both 1 yellow away from a 1-match suspension. However, that was the 19th game of the season, so there's that initial amnesty, so they won't get a suspension when they pick up the next yellow card, so that's a big positive. Chris Metham will be back on Tuesday. Obviously, Dennis Erkin comes into the mix as well, so both Ian and Michael sort of interested in who might play on Tuesday and who might not. And I think it's a really interesting question because I think Dan Ballard is pretty much back to his best now. He had a tricky start of the season because he had that injury where he basically missed all the pre-season. Always really hard for a player to get up to speed after that. Chris Metham, I think, has been arguably Sunderland's player of the season so far since he came in. Absolutely exemplary. And Luke O'Nien is Luke O'Nien. He's a leader, he's incredibly consistent, and he's comfortably Sunderland's best player in possession of all those defensive options. So I think it's a really tricky one. There's a part of me thinks it will go back to Metham in 09 because that was a really promising partnership. However, I know how much he rates Ballard, and he also feels Ballard offers something completely different because he's so physically dominant. And that is such an effective weapon, especially in the Championship, which can sometimes be a really physical division. So I know the kind of point of this video in this format is for me to answer questions. I have no idea who's going to play as centre-half on Tuesday night. I think it's a really, really interesting debate, and I can't wait to see which way he goes with it. I've been talking for about 16 minutes, so I think that's my cue to shut up and let you get on with your lives now. But thank you so much for sending all your questions and comments in. Great to be able to talk about a Sunderland win, a strong Sunderland performance, and an academy graduate, a boyhood Sunderland fan, being the match winner as well, which was just sort of an added bonus from a really, really good day. So thanks for sending your questions in. Thanks for watching. Obviously, all your other analysis, post-match reaction will be on the Sunderland Echo website. Plenty more in the build-up to the Bristol City game, and I'll see you probably sometime on Wednesday for a chat about the Bristol City game and hopefully 3 more points for Sunderland. Thanks for watching.